Hello to everyone. My name is Alejandra. I'm the co-chair of Rotaract for Peace, and it's my pleasure to be with all of you here. I'm glad to introduce all these speakers that are really interested in this topic that is intergenerational peace. And of course, in the name of Rotaract for Peace, we hope to continue give these tools developed in these kind of webinars. So thank you for being here again, and it's my pleasure to introduce Calisa.
Okay, thank you, Alejandra. Yeah, so the topic for today's discussion is intergenerational peace and cooperation. To make a few clarifications at the beginning so we can situate our discussion in a specific context, when we're talking about generations and intergenerational, we're just meaning people of a variety of different ages. We're not defining a generation between two specific dates, we're just talking about people from all ages. And because the Rotary family has people from all ages, this should be a good place to have this sort of discussion. The second point of clarification is just the definition of peace that we're using while we're speaking. So peace is often considered the absence of war or conflict, but within Rotary and many other organizations and discussions, we talk about positive peace. So positive peace describes the attitudes, structures, and institutions that underpin and sustain peaceful societies. So therefore, even if a country isn't in an active conflict, these values can be developed, improved, and maintained. And specifically today, we're talking about how that can be done through intergenerational projects. So this is why we are so lucky to have people from multiple continents with a variety of ages who all have different stories and experiences. Most projects, in one way or another, from all different generations, have a component of positive peace. So to start us off, if we can go through a round of introductions to understand the perspectives of all of the panelists. And if we could start with our Interact representative, and then we can go through to Rotaract, Rotary Peace Fellows, and then Rotarians. All right, then Salome, would you like to start us off?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Really appreciate this invitation. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Salome Cordova. I'm 15 years old. I'm the past president, founder of my Interact Club. We founded the last year in September, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Arevalo Mojica. I am originally from Colombia, but I live in New Jersey, United States. I'm the past president of my Rotaract Club here in New Jersey, the DRR here in District 7475, and I'm very happy to be here, so thank you.
And then Phil, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. What great work in terms of bringing different people together, different ages. So I'm Phil Gittings. I'm from sunny UK, not so sunny at the moment. I'm a Rotary Peace Fellow, and I've been fortunate, I guess, in this context of the conversation to work on many projects which engage both youth and community. Over the last 10 years with Rotary, a lot of projects which involve intergenerational work. So looking forward to listening to you, learning with you, etc. And thank you so much for the invitation. And my hat goes off to you for the great work that you all do.
Thank you, Phil. Christine?
Hello, everyone. It's so great to join you today. I am joining in from Kenya, in Africa, in the eastern part of Africa, in the western side of Kenya, which is Kisumu, close to Lake Victoria. But I have been an advocate for youth peace and security for about 5 years now. And intergenerational talks is one of the things that we champion for. Because in Africa, the one reason that the one problem that we have been experiencing is culturally, older people don't like listening to younger people. And so when it comes to policy formulation, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to government, we're trying to bridge that gap between our culture that does not necessarily advocate for the old and young to share ideas and coexist. Thank you. And it's so glad to join you all and to hear and learn from you.
Thank you so much for being here today. Sandra?
Hello, everybody. My name is Sandra Perdomo. I live in Bogota, in Colombia, in South America. And now I am the district chair for the Rotary Youth Exchange Program in Colombia. 4 years ago, I am Interact, Rotaract, and Rotarian since 30 years ago. And I am the mentor of Interact, Rotaract, and now I'm the president of the projects of my club, the Rotary Club Bogotá Centenario.
Thank you, Sandra. And then Urs?
Thank you for being here and thank you for inviting me. My name is Urs. I'm from Switzerland. I'm a Rotarian for about 25 years. I think some of you did even not exist when I became a Rotarian. And since I have accomplished a lot of things. I've been club president, club governor, and since then I have launched in Switzerland 2 action groups. Action Group for Mother and Child Health. I think this is of great importance also for Kenya. I think you have there a lot of things to do. As Action Group of Peace, and in the context of it, together with Walter Giger, we launched now the Geneva Peace Incubator, where we like to develop projects in the domain of peace. And yesterday evening, I was just on launching a 3rd action group in Switzerland against plastic soup in the environment. And I will become a director of the board of directors and I'm based in the zones 15, 16. So I will be responsible for Rotarians in Germany, Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And the key points which I pursue are peace, mother and child health, environment and communication.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your introductions and thank you all for being here today. A little bit about myself, I'm going to be the moderator, so asking questions over the course of the next hour or so. My name is Clarissa Heinrich. I was previously an interactor and I'm now a Rotaractor based out of Geneva, Switzerland. I'm also a student of international relations and I'm the Rotaract representative to the Swiss Liechtenstein Rotarian Action Group for Peace. So what Urs was just talking about. And I am looking forward to being here with everyone today. So we have such a diverse group. I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. So first, if we could start off by asking, I think if we can start maybe with Salome again, does your country, district, or club often carry out any intergenerational projects? What's your experience in that? What projects have you had in the past?
Personally, last year when I was president of my club, I participated in different projects together with my Rotary Club and Rotaract. There were 2 projects that I like very much. One of them was carried out with my Rotaract Club in Bogotá, which was based on the delivery of Christmas gifts to children in a hospital who had orphan diseases. I really like the organization and logistic as they could carry out because we had a very good communication. We helped spread the information through social networks, and they in turn help us with transportation. The other project that we carried out was with my Rotary Club, painting a school in a neighborhood, which in a way was easier because they communicate with the community and establish their needs. And they also be able to get the permission from our parents. District projects encourage me values such as gratitude and appreciation of everything we have. Thank you.
That's awesome, Salome. Thank you so much. It's great that Interact is able to work with Rotaract and Rotary clubs. And I think when we're all working together, it can have such a big impact. Maria, would you like to add anything? Have your club or any of your districts had any intergenerational projects and how did that work? How did they work?
Sure. So one of our staple projects is this meal packing event that we do every year. And so typically we have 3 locations in the district at various universities where we set a goal. In our case, it was 100,000 meals. And so we literally get everyone from, 5, 6, 7-year-olds to, older adults that live in homes. And so we spend about 5 hours packing meals and, you're shoulder to shoulder with someone that you've never met. And, you have a table of about 10 people. And so you can really interact with them and just talk, obviously, as you're providing community service. So I think that's that's one of our favorite events, and it's very cool. And then just on our club level, they participate in this camp called Camp Mary Hart, where children with learning disabilities are kind of sent there for a few days, and you have the Rotarians and the Rotaractors. They play games with them, and it's a really good learning experience for everyone, right? Because you kind of see how people with disabilities like behave on a normal day, and you get to learn from them because it's not something that you're used to, and they also get to learn from you from just outside experiences, and you get to read books, play games, and stuff like that. So it's very cool.
So those both sound like awesome projects. Thank you. Christine, what projects have you done in your region specifically on intergenerational cooperation? You already talked a little bit about it, but would you have anything that you'd like to add?
Sure. I should actually mention that I am not a Rotaractor here in Kenya, but I have engaged with some of them. But as in my organization, which is a network organization, we usually have, we hold like talks. We usually call them barazas. A baraza is like a town hall where we get to then interact and share ideas interculturally. And as a culture, usually we have elders like during the night talk to the young people. And so by that, we get to share stories and share some of the experiences that we're going through in life. We're also trying to see how we can get some youth-friendly services, but these youth-friendly services are also incorporated with like older guys. So you'll find a younger woman who's pregnant being attended to by an older woman who also tries to explain to them the changes that are happening in her body and some of the things to expect once the child comes. And so we've been able to sort of lay out platforms where we can encourage a lot of older people, especially men, to talk to younger people and to share their ideas and to also just kind of breach that fear between older and younger people.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. Phil, would you like to add anything about, you have a little bit of a different perspective as well, coming from being a Rotary Peace Fellow, but any projects that you have been able to carry out that have really pulled on the intergenerational approach?
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to do a bit of a shout out to Christine, who said that she's not an Interact or Rotaract, but I just want to put it out there right now that I hope that she will apply. And I'm just putting out there now that I'm here to kind of support in any particular way, because I think she'd be a wonderful Rotary Peace Fellow. So just putting it out there, as you know, Christine, so just putting it out there.
Yes, thank you for being here, Christine.
So yes, as many of you know, I was very fortunate to be invited to help start and develop New Gen Peace Builders. So we've done many projects over the years, engaging Interact, Rotaract, Rotary Peace Fellows, Rotarians in many different countries. In fact, I was fortunate to lead the first project outside of the US and the first project with university students in Bolivia. And that project in itself involved Interact, Rotaract, Rotarians, and the broader community. So it actually took the young people through an educational experience, training them in peace building frameworks and things like this. Focused on students from 3 different universities, private and public. And then those university students took their learning and then they went into primary schools and taught primary school students in many different schools across La Paz about human rights. All that then culminated in a co-created, co-designed, co-led, because the young people actually presented, end of project community celebration, which was attended by over 120 people. The young people presented their projects to the community. Rotarians were there, the United Nations were there, the Director of Ministry of Education, Save the Children, etc. And really importantly, which I think is really important, the parents were there to see the great work of the young people as well. So there's one example. And I hope we're going to have some time today that I really want to talk about, and kudos to Alejandra and others that we're working with on this, a project project, which is really focused around this idea of intergenerational peace work. And it will be a first of its kind for Rotary in the Rotary world. It's a collaboration between World Beyond War, which is the organization I work for. We're a membership organization, 175 countries, and the Rotary Action Group for Peace. And it will actually be training 120 people, and 100 of them will be young people from 10 different countries. So if people are interested, I can talk more about that, but I want to be quiet for the moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, we definitely would like to hear about that later on in the conversation. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Phil right now? Anything else to add to his conversation? Okay, then we'll cycle through everybody and then we can have a general discussion afterwards. Okay, who's next on our list? Sorry.
It's me.
Sandra, yes.
Yes, I have a long experience working with youth, like the district chair for Rotary Youth Exchange program in my district, which has increasing the number of students impacting their lives. The experience shared between all of those involved benefit the students, family, students that come to Colombia and change their perspective about my country, and the same for the Colombians in the world. My Rotary Club have worked in 2 global grants, and the first one is the Council Resolution of United Nations, which is the project focused in the women's victims of the armed conflict in the country. The project involved them and as well their children and the youth from the community. And the second project is Pacificarte, which helps vulnerable children between 8 and 18 years old and learning about human rights and use that through the art.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, it's really great to get a perspective also from someone who has interacted with a lot of people who have participated in Rotary Youth Exchanges. I know those can be some pretty incredible life-changing experiences for young people. Thank you. Urs?
Your question was whether we very often make intergenerational projects, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, what are your experiences? Like a general, to introduce everybody and their experiences. What's been your experience?
We have developed in our district guidelines. These guidelines concerns the cooperation between Rotarians and Rotaractors and young peoples. And we also have introduced the function of a new generation chair who cares about the next generation and the interactions between Rotarians and the representative of the younger generation. I think this is very important because many programs of Rotary are focused on young people and on intergeneration activities. So we have made these guidelines and we distinguish between regular cooperation and occasional cooperation, between Rotary clubs and Rotaract clubs and whatsoever clubs. This leads that people to better knowledge of each other and regular contacts and discussions amongst the different organizations. And so we can focus our different programs in a more appropriate way. For instance, RILA, I think this is an intergenerational program which is brings big advantages for both of us. Youth exchange program, kids camps, also questions within vocational service. We make professional information for people so they can use, so they can choose their future profession. And of course, we have also the question of intergenerational projects in the context of mother and child health, where I think the question, how can we enforce women and younger girls so that they can live from their own decision and not be completely manipulated by the society. So this is a big challenge, and I can tell you that actually we even discuss these questions in the board for the future directors. What can we do to promote a better future for girls? So perhaps you have some ideas. If you have some ideas, please let me know. Then I will note it and bring it to the project. If you are interested in particular projects, I have a number of them, but I think I just like to present this general points.
Thank you. Yeah, that is perfect. So I think everyone has had a chance a little bit to explain what their background in intergenerational projects are. And I think we'll go through the order again, but if anybody ever wants to add a question or a comment at some other point, let's mix up the order a little bit so that people can be interacting with each other. So I think first, I think we've heard that there's all of these different projects that are going on in different ways to include young people in the conversation, but there's also the flip side of that, right? We have a representatives from Interact and Rotaract, and also from that point, ways to reach out towards Rotarians and older generations to make sure that projects have different opinions and all sorts of different things like that. So for our next question would be, why is an intergenerational approach important, and how can you strengthen intergenerational participation? And we can start off again with Salome. So you spoke a little bit already about how you worked with Rotarians and how you've been able to work with Rotaractors. But from your perspective as an interactor, like why is that so important? Why is that so important in your projects, and how can you strengthen that participation?
Okay, a simple way to make this connection easier, I think that you must first strengthen the peace with your Rotary Club and Rotaract sponsor. And for this, you can do like 1 or 2 projects per month. They could also provide us conference on how to organize a project for them to interact and thus make it much easier to develop this. Thank you.
Thank you, Salome. I know I'm coming from the perspective that I used to be an interactor as well. And I know that definitely being able to attend Rotary and Rotaract meetings was pretty exciting and pretty interesting to be a part of. And I know that Rotarians also were able to attend our meetings as well and cooperatively create projects, which was a pretty cool opportunity. Maria, would you have anything that you would like to add? Specifically, why is such an intergenerational approach important when you're developing projects?
So just historically speaking, right? If we kind of look back at our ancestors, typically the older people would pass on like critical information for, the younger adults or even the kids. And since our lifestyle is changing very drastically from what it was to what it is right now, I think we're losing that touch. And so it's, in my opinion, it's critical, right, that we start developing these projects, because we should have that transfer of information from the older adults to the younger kids. And so I think these projects can be fairly simple if we kind of just explain the importance of what it is that we require from them. And so with that, we can kind of create measurable results by just amplifying the amount of projects that we have. So, they can be as simple as kind of having an ice cream party, right, with younger kids and older adults, where they kind of just talk about a topic for the whole day and kind of learn. Or it can be as complex as literally integrating a daycare facility within a retirement home, and then you have these older adults becoming their surrogate grandparents. So I don't know. I think we should really kind of focus on the purpose and driving that message to people, so that they can then become empowered and continue to participate in these kinds of projects.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, it's so important to be able to learn from past experiences because yeah, that's how we are. That's where we are today. Christine, would you like to add to that? I know you previously spoke a little bit about how bridging the gap between generations and not necessarily the younger people and the older people not necessarily being able to connect. Would you like to add about why you think such an intergenerational approach is important, Christine?
I totally agree with Maria in the sense of the knowledge gaps that exist between the older people and the younger people, and who else is going to demystify some of these myths that come out of, you can't, like, older people are not approachable, or older people just want to keep to themselves, or younger people are just so engrossed into their phones and technology, and they don't want to pass on that knowledge. So really sharing that knowledge and demystifying the myths that come with a certain generation only wants to hang out with a certain generation because they understand best what their issues are. We are the people to do that, and if we can't be able to bridge that gap, the knowledge gap, then I'm sure even when it comes to policy writing, sometimes you will be writing policies out of ignorance in this case, because you don't know what has worked before. What were the challenges that the generation before you experienced in addressing some of the issues? What are the environmental issues that come to play? So there's a lot of knowledge transfer on both directions. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Phil, would you like to add anything to that? I know you already have a lot of experience in making sure that these conversations and these processes are growing in both directions. Do you want to talk a little bit maybe about, yeah, like what's the danger of having this disconnect between generations, Phil?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with the three speakers before me. They made some amazing points, and no pressure on mine to kind of follow up. So what are some of the dangers? I think one of the dangers is if we look at and if we think about that we're all interested in working towards sustainable peace and development, broadly termed, or if we're all interested in working toward a culture of peace, then everybody has a role to play in building peace. So although we might be interested in, let's say, following Gandhi, who said, if we want real peace in the world, we have to start with the children, which I think there's a real good point there, we should also think about starting with children and including all generations. So no viable approach to achieving sustainable peace and development can really exist without taking into account the role of all of us in this. So then, if that's the case, then that underpins the importance of engaging everyone in these, what my colleagues have spoke about before, this intergenerational work. So Christine spoke about the knowledge gap, and I agree. And I also think there's an implementation gap as well, because I think we're actually getting better at and I'm a social scientist, so I do work on this, and I know that there is work to be done in terms of gaps with knowledge, but there's an implementation gap as well. So the challenge is, how do we move from policy and paper to kind of a real people movement? So we have the resolutions from the UN to really say that we should be including young people more, but as Christine really knows and other people know, there's a lot of work to do in terms of putting that into practice. And I think one of the challenges in terms of putting it into practice, in addition to the obvious things like investment, so shout out to Rotarians, invest more in intergenerational projects would be one. Include more people in intergenerational projects would be another. And of course, partnership would be another approach. But one of the real challenges, and I think it's a space, hopefully, everyone to kind of be a little bit controversial and get things, discussions going, is that I think there's a real need for training people in youth work literacy. So people might be good at doing projects. That's not necessarily means that they're good at working with young people, and vice versa. So how do we go about, creating those spaces and developing capacity for people to work on intergenerational projects is an open question.
Thank you very much, Phil. Yeah, that definitely summarized what other people said quite well and added to the importance of why we're here talking about this today. So, Sandra, would you like to add anything to this? Why is an intergenerational approach important? Specifically what Phil was talking about as well, with having people being trained with working with youth. You have worked with youth in your position, working with Rotary exchange students. Would you like to add anything about how it's important and how you see implementation of projects with people from multiple generations important?
Yes, Kalisa, is very important because you can use the experience and the knowledge from the Rotarians, and you mix with the motivation and enthusiasm for the young people. And it's very important because it's a mix of a lot of things, and the Rotarians can plan better the projects, and that you communicate the projects the different way like the Rotarians making. It's very important to use the two parts for the two visions of the Rotarians and the Rotaractors and Interactors, because the way to see the projects are very different. But it's a good point, and take this is the center stage for the last year, because is the way to increase the projects in the community.
Thank you, Sandra. And then, Urso, do you have anything that you would like to add about the discussion that we've had up until this point about the importance of an intergenerational approach and what you've seen from your perspective?
Well, I also think that the intergenerational projects are important. So it brings generations closer together. There's nothing brings people so much together like successful projects. And these help for mutual understanding and also developing projects from different perspectives. Because I think there's very diverse background of the elder generation and the younger generation. And they are complementary. The elder generation has a lot of experience, but sometimes they are within their experience and not open for new ideas. And therefore, I think we need a dialogue between the new generation, which comes with critical and new ideas, and the elder generation with experience. And I think both together develop big synergies and successful projects. So the third point is these projects sometimes offer new opportunities for the younger generation to have the possibility to define what they need and what's useful for them. Therefore, the elder generation can work on a more focused way to foster the possibilities of the new generation. And finally, there are sometimes also complementary functions. Elder generation perhaps brings sometimes the money, and the younger generations the workforce, and both together can accomplish wonderful results. So I think if we work together, it brings advantages for all of us.
Thank you, Urs. Yeah, so I think everyone's in agreement the importance of an intergenerational approach, and I hope the dialogue that we're having today can help us move even further in that direction. So for our next question is a little bit of a practical side of things. There are obstacles. It's great that we're able to have an intergenerational approach to building projects and to building these connections, but there are going to be some obstacles. And these obstacles are going to be different depending on what age you are, right? So if we can start maybe back with Salome, what obstacles, if you've encountered any obstacles, have you encountered when implementing intergenerational projects?
Yes, as I said before, everyone has a different way of carrying out projects, but I think that the conflict lies in the independence that the age difference between us. Maybe as pre-teens, we see everything much easier, and that can bring both good and bad consequences. Because sometimes we come to have a lot of ideas and we don't always release them because of the desire to do many things at the same time. Also because we are like a smallest link in the whole family, and members, we have to go through a much longer process to carry out projects because we need the approval of our mentor, our sponsor Rotary Club, and our parents. On the other hand, I think that the Rotarians carry out projects more quickly because they have had experience and this organization for much longer.
Great. Thank you, Salome. Okay, so now Maria, you've already spoken a little bit about how you have been able to create these great spaces for dialogue. Have you had any particular challenges, and if so, how have you been able to overcome them?
Yeah, so kind of to my previous talking point was that the importance of really carrying out a good project is conveying the message and the purpose why you're doing it. If you don't properly do that, then in my opinion, people really won't see the purpose or the reason why they should participate. And so one of the obstacles I would say is kind of maintaining that engagement. So once you establish the project, if you do a good job at conveying the message, then people will stay because they'll feel like they are contributing to it, and it's something that becomes important to them. Now, if they don't feel that sense of importance or that sense of value, then you start seeing people kind of drop off. You know, they stop coming to the meetings or they stop participating in stuff. So I would say that that's one of the biggest and most critical things to maintaining a project. And then kind of like what Salome said is that when you have a lot of young people, you tend to make mistakes, and I'll include myself in that because I've made mistakes because I think things are so clear, so easy, and sometimes you forget to ask your parents, the Rotarians, whoever, you know, should I be doing it this way or should I be doing it this way, right? And so, you know, keeping a clear path is also very important, but also asking for help. So not asking for help is obviously a problem. So, you know, little things like that, I believe really make the difference in carrying out a successful project, but also they can present obstacles if you allow them to be.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. That was really insightful. Thank you, Christine. You've already spoken a little bit about your experience making these community forums and things like that. Is there an instance that maybe you can bring up to illustrate your point, or any specific challenges that you have had and how you've been able to overcome them when trying to get people from all generations to be working together?
Right. So one thing that comes off to mind is gender roles. And in Africa, especially the different areas in Africa, and in this case specifically to Kenya, gender roles are clearly defined traditionally. And so sometimes as a young woman, I can't go speak to older men, or I can't go to a forum where older men sit, because that is essentially not a place that traditionally I should be in. And so then that becomes a hindrance when you're trying to pass on some knowledge or communication. So I'd have to look for an older guy who the men will then identify with. The other thing is patriarchal. In Kenya, much as we're developing, we're still deeply embedded in patriarchy. And so that just kind of acts as a barrier towards just trying to reach to even like some job opportunities. Because people will tell you, no, you're a woman, you deserve to be at home taking care of the children. So really, we can't be here listening to you, what you have to offer. The third thing is poverty. So you'll realize that if I am a poor person, I am not able to join such forums. And so I'm not able to share some of the knowledge that I have, because everybody is like, but you're poor, what do you have to tell us? And so poverty has created a role in somewhat making people feel inferior, and making them feel like they have nothing to share with people. And sometimes the rich will actually look at the poor people as people who need to be taken care of. Like it's a problem for them to be solved. And so when you're going to engage with them, you're not necessarily talking with them, you're talking at them. And so at the end of the day, that just kind of becomes a barrier when it comes to coming out with resolutions from some of these meetings, and just having people to agree or agree to disagree. And lastly, we have different learning styles. If you're holding a forum with older and younger people, it gets to a point where one side of the room, which has the younger people, totally understanding what you're saying and identifying with what you're saying. But the other half of the room is looking at you like, what exactly just happened? What are you trying to say? And so when it comes to the learning style and the languaging, it becomes very different to have the older and younger generations in one room and have them understand concept at the same pace. Thanks.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, that was very, very interesting. All of your points, and they're going to be different depending on context for sure, but I think that those points hold through for no matter where you are in the world. So I think I'm going to mix up the order of who's speaking a little bit now, just so we can get some responses in a different order. So I think we're going to jump to Us, if you would like to maybe make a couple comments about what has been previously spoken about, and any specific problems that you have encountered when you're trying to reach out to people to create such an intergenerational connections and things like that.
What a surprise. I'm very impressed by the explanations of Christine and the cultural background and the cultural obstacles. And I think the cultural background has to be taken into consideration if somebody starts a project, otherwise it won't work. I achieved many projects during my professional time, And there were some key points when something went wrong, which I can mention here, and they are independent from the cultural background. One is a missing need assessment, that we don't start by asking ourselves who wants the result of our project, and is it really useful for all the people who are concerned who should profit from it. The second weak point is an unclear analysis of the initial situation. Sometimes we start with wish thinking, and afterwards everything is far more complicated than we imagined. This is a normal case, but if it surpasses a certain amount, it puts into question also the motivation of the involved. The third point is no clearly formulated project goal. I think all should agree what they want to achieve together, why and how. And I think this is very important communication, which takes time to develop a common view. And if we have this common view, we have also to define our roles of the different participants. If we meet on eye level, or if we have a strong hierarchical order or whatsoever, but we have to know who is the boss, and who does what, and who is the specialist in which domain, and what are we awaiting from each other. And finally, what is important is a really binding commitment for the achievement of these objectives. So the people not have a new ideas, they run away and do something else. This is very difficult to achieve a project if this would be the case. But I think if we have a team which keeps together, which has the discussions on eye level and mutual recognition, it can be well sworn in to achieve a project goal. And my experience is a successful team has success with the most complicated projects if they're really convinced that they want to achieve it. And I wish you a lot of projects with such project teams.
Thank you, Urs. Thank you. Okay, so Phil, the original question we're talking about is what obstacles have you encountered when implementing intergenerational projects? But something that was brought up both by Christine and by Phil, and has been brought up at other times during the conversation as well, is the question of why are we doing this project? Why are we doing it? And it was brought up as being a missing needs assessment or an undefined goal. Would you have any strategies or suggestions if this is the challenge for how to overcome that when working in an intergenerational setting?
Okay, I'll try and touch on that one, and in doing so, it would be great if I can kind of touch on some of the challenges as well. I just like to follow us in terms of, I think you in terms of sort of put this wonderful webinar today, are really practicing what you preach in terms of, what's the benefits of bringing intergenerational, people together. For a learning experience, and I've been listening to different generations speaking, and I've been nodding my head thinking, oh my gosh, these are such good points. So I just want to kind of just say congratulations for that. It's been a wonderful learning experience for me. So it was really practicing, what you preach. So I've got 5 things, and hopefully in doing that, at least I can kind of touch on what Urs was speaking about, and they come under these headings. 1, let's call it process and products. 2, politics. 3, learning. 4, ownership. 5, projects. And I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. Okay, so the first one, if we think that we're working on projects, one of the things that we need to look at, and it's been touched on as well, is this interesting tension between a project should start with not the question of what we're going to do or how we're going to do it. A project should start with always the question of why, the question of purpose. And then once we get a real understanding of the why question, the purpose, and then we can start to think about how are we going to do this, who's going to be involved, what are we going to do, etc. Right? But broadly, when we're speaking of projects, it's this tension between process and products. And we're all individuals, and Christine made some good points that we have different learning styles. We also have different ways of working. So I can imagine now all of us here have different ways of working in terms of some of us are more aligned to, let's focus on the process, the development of the human beings who are in the project, right? And then there's other people who are more focused in, no, let's focus on the products, let's get these results, etc. So we need to be aware of that tension between the two. So that's the first one. And in doing so, if broadly, one way of thinking about a project is to look at the needs, and the needs in 3 different ways. The needs of individuals on that team. So how do we go about doing that project and looking after the needs of the individuals on that team? But then that team is a team. So how do we go about looking after the needs of that team? Okay, so again, there's difficulties there if one person is going to take over, and try and run the show. And then there's the needs of the project. So again, there's this kind of interesting challenge and tension between needs of the individual, the group, and the task that's at hand. So I think it's not an easy answer, but it's something to be aware of when doing projects. The second one is, and this is kind of a bit more close to home, is politics. So I totally, underscore what Christine said. It needs to be contextualized and things like this. But I also mean, and this is specific to Rotary projects also, is that sometimes through experience, I've had opportunities to work on projects in different countries and touch on certain topics and have been advised by people, okay, we can't touch that topic here because Rotary is apolitical and a-religious. Okay, so I'll be honest, I'm not a Rotarian, I'll be honest, it's been a really interesting one for me because I'm very much, an educator, and I think we should be exploring issues. Okay, so politics, so just be aware of that, so I can give you one example in Argentina when looking at abortion or something like this. Okay, so politics is at play. The third one is learning. The purpose of doing a project is not just to do the project. And the purpose of doing the project is just not to get something done, hopefully. It should be an opportunity to learn as well. And we only learn by stopping and by reflecting. So good learning or significant learning does not take place just by doing. So some of us are real doers, and doing is necessary, but it's also necessary to stop and reflect as well. So there's another thing. And then the fourth one, it does kind of touch on other things where people have said ownership. Projects from experience are more successful if you get buy-in right away from the local community, and you get buy-in from them and do projects that are co-designed with, led with and by the community themselves. So that's including them, not tokenistically, but really including them in designing, implementing, evaluating the project, and also deciding what the products should be. So with my social research hat, we might do research, right? Well, the community might say, we're not interested in reading an article, Phil, about the wonderful work. We want a different product, so we should have to adapt to what the local community want. And I really love this term, nothing about us without us. And if anything comes away that I really want to highlight here, nothing about us without us. Don't go and do projects to communities. You do projects with the communities. And that takes listening, and that takes learning. And that takes leveraging the skills that are already there. So listening, learning, and leveraging. And then the fifth one, which is quite a controversial one in the context that we're talking about projects, there's an issue in the international development field and also peace building field, and I've also wrote about it in my edited book, by the way, and Kalisa, you've got a copy of it, and I'm waiting for a review from you, by the way. Projectization. Is that, okay, if there's an issue, let's go and do a project. Looking at Colombia, Sandra, you can talk much more about this than me. 50 years of civil war, it's not going to be resolved by 2 or 3 years worth of projects. You need a generational focus to address issues. So there's an issue with focusing too much on projects, and we should be looking at processes and programs and cultural change, not just projects. So I'm saying that they're a necessary part, but they're in no means sufficient. So thank you. I kind of went off on one there. Thank you.
No, thank you, Phil. Those 5 points that you brought up are really great. Do you think you could actually put those in the chat so we can look at them again if you have them noted? That would be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Okay. So Sandra, would you have anything that you would like to add about this? You said originally that you've been in Interact and Rotaract and now in Rotary. Would you have any comments that you would like to make about any specific obstacles you've encountered, or if you would like to comment on the specific context that Phil just brought up about
yes, we detect 2 specific problems or for obstacles for implementing the projects. The first one is that when you start a project, the young people wants to or need immediate results, but with something frustrate does involve, and the project is abandoned in the process for the lack of continue of the actors. And another problem is when the young people hear lives change easy and for work or for academic situation, and they have a mobility, and is that difficult of carry on projects in the long term. Is the two obstacles we detect in the project with the young people, because the projects from like Phil say is have a or need a process and is not too easy to implement in the short term.
Okay, thank you very much, Sandra. Okay, so if we can go back to Salome, do you have any comments? Do you have anything that you would like to add after hearing the conversation about the challenges and how people have been able to overcome them?
No, I agree with everything in this room.
Okay, Maria, would you have anything else that you like to add about the specific points that were brought up about, yeah, making processes instead of projects? Because we are talking about projects, but the importance of having a process of learning.
Well, you're gonna have different processes depending on where you are. So I really wanted to touch on Christine's point, because some of the points that she brought up, honestly, I didn't even think about. For example, the patriarchal society. Here in the United States, it's a lot of different cultures in one, and so everyone is seen as the same, right? And for lack of a better term, it might not be that way, but we tend not to think of the states as a patriarchal society. It's more just neutral. Also, the point of poverty, right? Here, at least in my area, we don't really necessarily worry about that, because we say, the Rotary group that we are a part of, or our district, has enough funds that we can, carry out these projects. So we don't see that as an obstacle or as a problem, but Christine does, right? And so it's very important that, and I love the fact that we're all here and we can share these experiences, because otherwise we would kind of just ignore them. So in terms of processes, it's kind of just targeting your audience, right? And figuring out who you want to impact, right? Set a controlled group, and kind of just say, here's what I believe should be a critical outcome, and here's how we should probably do it. So this is where you get, small groups and kind of just tackle the problem, make a process map and go that route. But then obviously the points that, for example, Phil brought up are important, right? We need to, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. we need to really kind of just consider all the obstacles in those 5 points that he said. And what Salome and Sandra said is obviously the younger generation think it's so easy, but it's really not. So that's why we need a variety of people in this process mapping and in this execution. But we also require the engagement so that the project can be sustainable. Without sustainable projects, what are we really doing?
Great, thank you so much, Maria. Christine, would you have anything that you would like to add on this point? You brought up specifically about different learning styles, right? And making everyone part of the process. And that's just another point that people have commented on since. Do you have anything that you'd like to add? Anything about that you'd like to add about that, about your context or your experiences?
Not quite. However, I have a question to Phil and Bruce. I hope I pronounced that right. So I have experienced, when it comes to ownership, a lot of divergent interests when it comes to ownership. And because ethnic differences is one of the issues, especially within the political sphere, that brings up a lot of conflict. How then do you make sure that the ownership of a project, much as at first it might be clear for everyone, at the end of the day, people don't start having divergent interest towards the ownership of that particular project?
Okay, great. Would either Urs or Phil like to answer that question? Or give a comment on that question?
Yeah, I do. I'm just curious if Urs wants to go first.
Well, you address a very important point, and many projects of Rotary were not successful in the long range because they created something, they implemented it in a region, and then they were not used in an adequate way. And I think there are lessons learned, and you can't launch any project in the future in Rotary with the support of the foundation without the community assessment. You have to gather the people who are involved in the project. They have to explain why they'd like to have this project, how they participate, and how they deal with it in the future. And if there is no unique approach of this, you can forget the project from the beginning on. I think this is a very important starting point. Now, I also see this is one of our instruments. It's a good instrument, but like every instrument, it doesn't work 100%. You never can exactly say what's going to happen in the future, but at least at the moment you can create a structure and perhaps also responsibilities. And what I think is very important with Rotary is a really strong involvement of the local clubs. Otherwise it won't work. And as I can tell you, this is one of our big difficulties, to find clubs which are capable and which are motivated to work with us together. So there are several reasons. In Africa, we have 37,000 Rotarians. This is a small number, and worldwide we have 1.2 million Rotarians, and many of them would like to create projects in Africa. And so you see, if millions of Rotarians come to the 37,000 Rotarians in Africa, so a little bit overcrowded with projects. And so I recommend you launch a Rotary Club, charter a Rotary Club. I am happy for every Rotary Club which is serious and which is capable to launch and to create beautiful projects together. At least we are very motivated to do so.
Thank you. Well, first of all, that was very interesting hearing the numbers. So you got me to think on that one. So yeah, that is a really interesting dynamic in terms of how we go about thinking about local ownership and what it looks like, and local engagement. So yeah, that's very interesting. Christine, great question, a very challenging question, and we should be asking ourselves challenging questions. That it's kind of touched on that there's no easy answers to this. First point towards addressing it is be aware of that tension. Whenever you're working in different contexts, always be aware of that tension and the kind of scholars would talk about it, of friction or hybridity, and when two different entities come together. So a local organization or local people versus internationals, how they work together. So a starting point is to be aware of that local ownership issue. If people are interested in it, there's some good work by Timothy Donas, he's wrote about local ownership. There's John Paul Lederach, who's wrote about local ownership in a really good book, Peaceland, what I would check out, that tries and addresses this issue around local ownership. And I think in terms of what's been spoken about, there's a few things that I think's come out is the importance of a conflict analysis. That should be a starting point. And in that starting point, doing the conflict analysis is not necessarily to find out what project that we should do. It's to find out what's already being done, and if there is a need for us. And one product from that conflict analysis, or let's say conflict context assessment, because some people might not want to call it a conflict in a different country, might be we shouldn't be there, and that should be the answer, that we shouldn't be there, that it's really better for the local community to do it themselves, and that international should not be involved. But that's not to say that internationals do not make the difference, because on many occasions they do. So it's all about, if anything, it's all about doing a project with the community, not about them, Nothing about us without us. And that only takes place through discussions and listening, and leveraging local resources and things like this. So no overall answer, Christine, to your very difficult, great question, but it's a response.
Great, thank you, Phil. Would anyone else like to add any insight into that question?
I have a question. I have a question actually that I'm thinking of, and I thought you did a really good job of kind of starting off by defining the terms right up front. Positive peace, which it gives us a useful frame for thinking about it. So here's a question for all. What's your definition of a peace project?
That's a good one. For those of you who aren't, I know, Phil, you work with this a lot, with this definition of positive peace. But for those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with all of the specific aspects, positive peace is defined, at least the definition that Rotary often uses includes things like a well-functioning government, an equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relations with neighbors, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, and sound business environment. So those are the aspects of the positive peace as they are defined. So if anyone else would like to answer Phil's question, that'd be great. What is the definition of a peace project?
Again, Phil, that's I think a hard question also to answer. However, I'd like to think of it in the 3 dimension of engaging people inside the room, around the room, and outside the room. Because then that kind of makes sure that we engage people at all levels. And just going off from not necessarily doing a project for the community, but doing a project with the community. I think that's how I define it.
Great, thank you, Christine. Would anyone else like to add to that?
Yes.
Turn on your microphone. Yeah.
Kalisa, in our district, we implement a positive peace project between Rotary and the Institute of Economy and Peace. The name is Positive Peace, and in our Rotaraction leaders from the YMCA prepared activities for and actions for peace. And this was the first time Rotary focused in Rotaract. It's a good example for a peace project, and we work in the same level with the Rotaractors, and so closely, and establishing objectives and priorities, and provide a close accompaniment. And this contributes to the successful to this project, and we have a lot of action for peace in the community. This is our experience.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for that insight. Does anyone else have anything they want to add? What is a peace project for you, or in your experience with your club, or your organization, or in your community?
Go ahead. Urs, go ahead, please.
I think every project which promotes positive peace is a peace project. But it's not limited on the activities on the focus area of peace of the Rotary Foundation. It also includes all the other now 6 areas of focus. I think maternal child health is a very important aspect for peace promotion, also with the development of the population and with the reduction of mortality of mothers and during pregnancy and birth. The water, for instance, is a very important aspect for peace building. Also basic education, economy, if a society is rich and is in a good situation, is good situated, I think peace is far more stable, but in a different way. So it's very interesting to look at the interaction between the area of focus and peace. And there we have a sort of box of instruments which we can take the right instrument on the right moment to achieve peace with my interdisciplinary approach.
Thank you, Urs. Yeah, we can definitely see, I like how you define that within the Rotary terms. I know that with building up these projects, for those of you who don't already know, but the Rotarian Peace Projects Incubator is an initiative that is happening in Switzerland right now, which is trying to bring people together from all different places, Rotary Peace Fellows, Rotarians, and Rotaractors, to connect the resources and the experience with community needs that are all around the world. And what's really interesting about that is these are peace projects, but they're in a lot of different things. a lot of different themes. So for example, an environmental project could be considered a peace project at the same time, because by improving environment in some capacity or making clean drinking water, it decreases the amount of conflicts. So I think that is very, very interesting. Thank you, Urs. Maria, you wanted to add something as well?
Yeah, so Urs said it way better than I could have. But I did just want to kind of touch on his and Christine's point to the fact that we should probably be engaging our audience by simply teaching them how to fish instead of giving them that fish, right? And so if we're able to kind of engage the community and say, here's what the results could be if everyone works together, then, you know, potentially we can start creating that generational transition that that Phil and Sandra were talking about, and Salome as well. Because without it, then our projects really just can't be sustainable. So that's my last note.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, so I think to expand on that question about engaging with the community and then trying to build these connections, what do you think, we can ask this question to multiple different people, but how can we make these connections easier? How can we make these intergenerational connections or connections between different sectors easier? So if we could start off with Salome, maybe if you'd like to make a comment, and how from your perspective do you think we can make these connections even easier?
Yes, well, I think that is important that already you said that we can learn something from the Rotaract or from the Rotarians, because many times when doing projects, Rotarians and Rotaractors can forget the children so that we have, that the interactors have. So, well, I think that is important, like, I don't know, do like 1 or 2 projects per month with the Rotarians and the Rotaract, to this, like, the relationship gets more closer. I don't know.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, definitely including interactors in these conversations as well, because oftentimes we're having this conversation, we're talking about Rotarians, and now we're including Rotaractors, but interactors as well come from a different perspective and a very important perspective. So thank you, Salome. Okay, so Phil, would you like to make a comment on improving these connections? I think you've already brought up multiple points, but if you'd like to talk about maybe a little bit about your own project with World Beyond War and the Rotary Action Group for Peace. If you want a chance to speak about that now.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, so in order to do that, so in terms of improving, I think that we could get a lot better at telling stories about capturing the work that is done, because Rotary and all of you are doing amazing work around the world, and we're not always the best at kind of telling the stories and showing the impact. So I think that would be one way to kind of try and improve or advance some of the work that we're doing. So, you know, what did happen? So not just showing the products, but actually capturing the process and being honest with all the challenges that happen in terms of when older and younger people come together. It's not easy. That's life. Relationships is difficult at times. So it would be really interesting to capture that process. So there's one thought. So you asked me to talk about this project, and really, it comes from you in terms of Rotaract for Peace. So you are the brainchild, you are the ideas, the energy, you know, that come to me first and basically said, it would be really cool to work with you at World Beyond War. And for those of you that don't know World Beyond War, we focus on ending the war system. We've award-winning global recognition. We won the Global Educators Challenge for educating young people and communities around global challenges, awarded by the London School of Economics and the Educators Foundation. So I said it'd be great. Yes, let's work together, but let's do it in a way that makes it a collaboration. So then we got in conversation with the Rotary Action Group for Peace, and now we're in the process of doing an MOU between World Beyond War and the Rotary Action Group for Peace. The project involves 2 parts. One, peace education training. So a 6-week online program, which draws from the best of our educational material, etc. But it does it in a different way. It looks at the head of peace building, the heart of peace building and the hands of peace building. The head looks at all the strategies such as creating a culture of peace, demilitarizing security, and managing conflict without violence. So this has been read by thousands around the world and diplomats and things like this. So we draw from our signature book. So 5th edition out right now if people are interested. And you can get it free as well, downloadable free version, so it's not about selling it. And then the second part is the heart. So we do 2 weeks looking at about you as a peace builder. My background is psychotherapy, so I'm really interested in turning the mirror inwards also and looking at ourselves. And then the last 2 weeks, very important in terms of today, looking at how do you go about doing a peace project. So that was the reason why I was asking a peace project, and I can come back and say something about that because I have an interesting kind of view on that actually. So that's the education part, and we want to take 120 people through that journey. 100 of them will be young people, 15, so I'm really happy that Salome is here, so 15 to 30. So we want to really engage Interact and Rotaract and other young people from 10 different countries. That's the idea, 10 young people from 10 different countries, a whole good mix. Then the second part is the peace project component. So they have actually 8 weeks to do their own peace projects. So when we're thinking about, I spoke about the process, when we're thinking about the product, at the end there'd be 120 people trained in strategies for peace building and preventing war. Also 10 projects in each of the countries, and also 10 or more community celebrations. So an opportunity for young people to showcase their work. So that project will be starting in February and then hopefully culminate by the end of May. So for those that are interested, please join us for the Geneva Peace Week webinars, and we'll talking about it more then. So thank you.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Phil. Okay, so I think we have one final that we'd like to ask everybody. And this is kind of linking up with what we were talking about previously about how we can improve these intergenerational connections. So we're going to go through everyone again, if you're willing, but how do you think from your role, whether it's an interactor, a Rotaractor, a Rotarian, a young peace builder, or a peace fellow, do you think that you can improve the process of intergenerational peace? Like intergenerational peace projects. So what, reflecting back, you just said, turning the mirror inwards, what do we think as a group and then individually as well? What do you think that in your role that you could do to improve, to add to this process and enrich this process even more? So does anyone want to start this off, because this is a pretty big question?
Actually, I wanted to go back to Phil. He explained the head, the heart, but didn't quite mention about the hand. So if you could please just say something.
Yeah, so 2 weeks, thanks Chriselle, it's very good. So 2 weeks are focused on planning a peace project. So basically, what are the processes that you have to go through to plan a peace project? And then you'll have 8 weeks, the young people have 8 weeks to actually do their project, and they'll do it in such a way that the 10 young people or whoever we think, and usually when we think of projects, the magic number is 7, but of course it changes, but let's say 10, would have mentoring by 2 adults. And they would work through the process for 8 weeks, and they would gain mentoring on a weekly basis from their mentors. We, World Beyond War, would provide oversight support for those mentors, who generally are kind of Rotarians or university professors, youth workers, social workers, etc. So this is the project I was talking to you about, Christine, and would love you to be involved with.
Awesome. Now, to answer your question, Khalisa, one of the things that I have learned in the few months I've been interacting with Phil is there's quite a lot to learn. And you can't honestly say you know everything in this field. Every day is a different day. And the more you're open to learning, the more you gain more information and the more you're able to add into the projects that you do in a more collaborative and inclusive perspective. And so the challenge for me has been making sure that I'm constantly redefining the knowledge that I have and being able to critically understand as a person why I'm being engaged in what I am doing, and is it really for me or for the community? So constantly just asking myself this question and being aware of the outcomes and how that affects me as a person and the community that I'm trying to represent. Yeah.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great approach. We always need to be learning, and I don't think I've participated in many of these discussions too up until this point, and every time I have a discussion, we're learning new points and we're hearing different perspectives, and we're constantly in a process of learning. So thank you so much. Does anyone else like to add their personally what they think they could do to not necessarily improve, but that it can add to an intergenerational approach in their own context or communities?
I think it is the first, when you first put the objective of the project and talk with all of the persons involved, and you're focusing in the objective and talk clear and concise from the objective of the project. And when you work in the same level with the Rotarians, Rotaracts, Interact, and the community, because all are part of the project and all we work in the same level from the objective of this project. It's very, very important focus in the objective of the project and not in the person, because we are human and we have different ways to make the things, but you focusing the objective is very important to successful for this project and the benefit of the community.
That is so true. Thank you, Sandra. Does anyone else have a reflection for the end?
Yeah, so typically when we engage in projects, I personally like to start from the basics, which is kind of just understanding who is in the room and who you're going to be working with. So typically we'll set up like a little get together, or, you know, whatever that might be. Let's just say a pizza party, for example, right? And you have everyone sit, not with their friends, but just you assign numbers and you mix them all up, and then they go off and sit with their new group. And so you really want people to kind of engage on that personal level so that you can kind of, you know, figure out strengths and weaknesses, right? We give them small activities so that they can kind of see like what kind of person they're working with. And so I think that's very important, because that's how you develop like good teams and teams that can work together very well. And then, you know, after the project is kind of worked on and then potentially completed, then you kind of want to do something very similar with the community that you're going to be working with. You want to kind of figure out what the people are like, you know, what strengths you can work with, and if they have any weaknesses, how can we work together to strengthen your weaknesses, right? And so things like that I think are critical, because you don't want to just this whole topic of volunteerism, for example, right, where people kind of show up somewhere, do a project, and then let's say maybe the kids, right, maybe they become very attached to the people that go, and then you just leave. You know, then the kids are kind of left with that void. So you really want to set up at least one point person from the community to kind of convey that message and continue this project. But if you can have this social gathering of some sort and have multiple point people, then you have more of a probability that this will continue.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Yeah, sustainability, ownership of these projects in a community level is so important. Would someone else like to make a comment?
Yeah. Okay.
Go for it, Salome.
I think that the difference begins with yourself, and as part of human growth and maturity, you must have like the basis to give before thinking about whether. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Salome. Would either Phil or Urs like to make a comment as well from your role, whether it's a Rotary Peace Fellow or a Rotaractor, what can be added to this intergenerational approach?
Sorry, Chip. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I think perhaps you know the action plan of Rotary. So it's a new action plan. And one of the points in the new action plan is expand your reach, which means grow and diversity of our membership and participation, create new channels into Rotary, increase Rotary's openness and appeal, and build awareness of our impact and brand, which means Rotary looks for openness, for new possibilities, for new action fields, and everybody should profit of this openness or show the Rotarians how they can achieve it, put it into action. And there is an obstacle that the clubs, like every community, is rather self-centered. We like to meet each other once a week and to see each other, to have friendship, to discuss about what happens in our communities, in our town. And I think all Rotary clubs need a sort of kick, that they see that the world does not end on the end of the village, but that the world begins on the end of the village. And we have beautiful networks and beautiful competences all over the world, amongst them more than 1,000 Peace Fellows. And what I see is a little bit Rotarians and Peace Fellows are two different words, and they don't discuss enough with each other. And we should really improve this discussion and this cooperation. And this is possible under two circumstances. One is Rotarians learn more about Peace Fellows. And this is what I like to achieve with my Peace Action groups, that in the countries they even know where these Peace Fellows are. Because in Switzerland there are, I think, how many Peace Fellows, Calissa, 18 or something like this. But nobody knows who they are. They disappear in Geneva or wheresoever. But they should be present in the Rotary clubs. They should actively contact the Rotary clubs and say, hey, we have a network, we have ideas what we can do, work with us together. On the other hand, Peace Fellows should learn more about Rotary, because I see that the Peace Fellows don't know nothing, certainly at least my experience, about what a global grant is, what it works, what the foundation policy is, what fields of activities are included in the foundation. If you know this, you can identify possible projects. You can go to Rotary clubs and say, listen, my Peace Fellow colleague in Kenya has such and such idea. And that's what we should offer to the club, are opportunities to get engaged, to have success, and to have experience to be successful together, not in their own village, but worldwide and on a global scale. And I think with mental openness to this sort of thinking, to this sort of acting, I think we make a big step forward, and I hope we can make this deep step forward from now on and the next 2 years. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Urs. Yes, that is our hope. Phil, would you like to finish us off?
Yeah, thank you. Some wonderful comments. And if we think of the speakers in general, we can think that they've kind of looked at kind of the inner world and the outer world. So the inner world of the peace builder, or the outer world of, the work that we do out there in the world. And with that in mind, I think, so you asked us to kind of turn the mirror inwards. I actually think that's really, 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 really important, really important. So I want to kind of congratulate Salome for kind of focusing on that as well, because that should be the starting place. What is one of the things that we can control in the world? Can't always control things out there. We can't. But we can control, or try and control, things that happen within ourselves. So turning the mirror inwards is a starting point for that, and of course, if we follow Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world, that's a starting point for us as peace builders. So although I spoke about before, the starting point might be a conflict analysis or a context assessment, the starting point should be a self-assessment. The starting point should be, what is my role? What values do I bring to this, before thinking of what projects I want to do? So I'll speak for myself. That is something that I want to try as best as I can, continue to work on each day, turning the mirror inwards and thinking, to what extent am I facilitating an environment for empowerment? Because I have an issue with this, with my psychotherapy background and youth work background, have this issue with we're there to empower the communities. I'm not sure that's the right kind of language that we should use. I think we should, one language would be, we're there to try and facilitate an environment where communities and young people can empower themselves. We're not there just to empower the people, it's about them empowering themselves. So a self-assessment. And I think one of the questions that I try asking myself is, what impact am I having on myself and the people that I try and work with, and learn from? And being really honest here, I think one of the things that will help me is that I need to start saying no a little bit more. So in terms of the projects, I'm being asked to do things here, 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 and I really need to start saying, you know, to look after myself a little bit better in terms of, okay, let's focus on this one project at a time. So I took it very personal because I think it was a good question you asked, you know, so I wanted to give a personal, vulnerable kind of response. So one of the things for me would be to start saying no to certain kind of projects.
Thank you for opening up and giving your honest answer. Then thank you to everyone today who has been willing to open up and share your own experiences. At this point, I'd like to give the floor to if anyone would have any final comments that they'd like to make before we close this meeting. Anything you'd like to add at the very end? No? Okay, I think we're good. Oh, unless if you would like to go, Phil.
Just to say thank you to you and what a great job you did in terms of, you know, managing this for us. You've made this session work for us, the way in which you've managed it so well. I think you've done such a professional job in terms of facilitating the process. So thank you and congratulations for that.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I've been scheduled like 2 minutes to give a final remark, but I've actually taken down a few things that you have said everyone here has said over the course of this meeting. And to repeat, nothing brings people together like successful peace projects and engaging people inside, around, and outside the room so that nothing about us without us. And that is exactly what summarizes this intergenerational approach that we're trying to achieve. So thank you to everyone for participating, and I'd like to hand it off finally to Alejandra to make our final closing comments.
Okay, thank you so much to everyone. It's my pleasure to be with all of you. I think I've been learning a lot from you. So thank you, Salome, thank you, Phil, thank you, Urs, thank you, Maria, thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Christine, for being here. I think, and I would like to add that it's really important to start working with interactive border actors and other alliances, not just Rotary, I mean, with other organizations and everything, because it's really important to know how to develop a project between other points of view. So thank you so much again. Thank you, Kalisa. I agree with Theo. You were very professional. Thank you so much for that. And I hope to see you soon. So thank you to all of you again. And I hope you're doing